Hello, it's John Heaton, and today I'm going to talk about Harry Nilsson. There's a lot of albums to get through that have in my collection. I'm not planning to do a review of every single album. That doesn't mean they're not worthy. A lot of them are. And the same way I didn't do a review of all of Yoko's albums when I reviewed my collection of her work. Anyway, I thought it'd just be easier just to show you my collection because I'm pretty fond of these records, a lot of them. Some are better than others. But anyway, here goes. I've managed to find all of them with one exception, which I can't find, which is out there somewhere. Maybe it's in England still. Anyway, so this is a kind of early years record I picked up. I'm not sure. It's not very good quality, and it's very early stuff, and I don't play it very often, but I thought I'd show it to you. This was his first album proper, Pandemonium Shadow Show, and for those of you who don't know, this was the album which came to the Beatles' attention, and when the Beatles, John and Paul, went to New York in '68 and launched Apple, they were asked, what's your favourite group? And they both said Nilsson, because I think they'd been listening to this album on which he covers You Can't Do That by the Beatles. And there's also some great tracks like 10 Little Indians, Sleep Late My Lady Friend, Without Her, and also a good version of She's Leaving Home. So two Beatles covers on here. Cuddly Toy is on here. It's a really fun album, and the Beatles took a great liking to it and didn't do Nilsson any harm by mentioning his name in that famous New York press conference. So this is a decent debut, and this was the follow-up, Aerial Ballet, which is probably even better. It's got Nilsson on his characteristic banging piano on the opening track, Good Old Desk, or sorry, the closing track, Bath, and then Good Old Desk is a nice mid-tempo ballad. Mr. Richland's favourite song is a really nice story song. Don't Leave Me is great. One was quite a big hit, I think, for someone else, not for him. Everybody's Talking was Nilsson's big song for the Midnight Cowboy movie, although he didn't write it. It was written by Neil. So this is definitely an album to check out, his second one. And then this came out, which was combining the highlights of both the first two albums. Quite nice to have that. And then in '69, his third proper album came out, Harry, which is even stronger than the previous two, in my opinion. The Puppy Song is a glorious opener and was covered by Mary Hopkin on the Postcard Apple album, with Paul producing. A great cover of Mother Nature's Son on here, with Nilsson singing almost as nicely as Paul on the original. And then other tracks, Morning Glory Story is great. Mr. Bojangles is a great cover choice for a cover. Rainmaker is a good song. I guess The Lord Must Be in New York City is probably the most famous from here. So and Simon Smith in The Amazing Dancing Bear, a nice song at the end there, which I think is a cover. I think Alan Price wrote that last one. I'll just check. No, I think Alan Price had a hit with it, sorry. Nilsson wrote it. And that happened occasionally in his career, that Nilsson had a hit with other people's material, and then people had a hit with his material. So what goes around comes around. 71, this album is probably his most well-known. Nilsson Schmilsson, produced by Richard Perry, and very familiar names playing on this album, like Jim Keltner, Gary Wright. Who else have we got? Klaus Voormann. Nilsson on piano, very effectively. It's a great album. It's probably his best album. If we're being objective, it's his best album. And this comes with a nice poster. Well, not nice. I mean, it's nice to have a poster in any album, but this particular poster is not perhaps one's favourite poster because it's just the front cover blown up. Anyway, So if you check out a copy of this second hand, make sure it comes with the poster. And if it doesn't, don't buy it. That's my advice to you. What's this? And this, sometimes it came with this poster, which is a bit of a clearer picture. Can't remember why I've got two here. Anyway, so then the follow-up, Son of Nilsson, very nearly as strong as the previous one. Again, produced by Richard Perry, and I think this is where Richard Perry came to Ringo's attention, because Richie Snare, aka Ringo, is on drums on a couple of tracks here, like Spaceman, and Richard Perry and Ringo must have hit it off because they got together and recorded the famous Ringo album the same year, with Nilsson contributing quite a lot, as we know, so that's interesting. Also, George Harrison is on this album, on the track You're Breaking My Heart, which is a pretty hilarious song with the F word if you want to check it out. Really nice track called Joy. Joy to the world was a beautiful girl, but to me, joy meant only sorrow. It's a kind of tongue-in-cheek, sad song. And nice packaging on here. And we get the Nicky Hopkins, you can see him as well there. And Richard Perry there with the curly hair. Del Newman is doing orchestral arrangements on a couple of tracks. I was lucky enough to cross paths with him at X University when he was a mature student. And I asked him about Harry. What was it like to work with Harry Nilsson? And Del Newman's comment was, he's mad. So, that was that. Good album, Son of Nilsson. Son of Dracula, which is an album, a film project which Ringo was involved in, starring Harry Nilsson and Ringo Starr. It was a complete flop. I think it was in the box in the cinemas for about less than a week. But you can see Ringo there, dressed as Merlin. And again, for Beatles completists, this album is interesting because on the first track, Daybreak, we've got Ringo Starr on drums and George Harrison on cowbell. So this is one of the great activities for Beatles fans in the late 70s, or when I first got into them, late 70s, early 80s, to go back and try and find out every track where Ringo or George had played on with each other or guesting on people's albums. There's a lot of stuff to discover, and the rest of this album is just stuff taken from the other albums, so it's only got that one track, I think, with maybe a couple of instrumentals, which was new to this album. But anyway, it's a curio. This album is another curio, in that it's slightly unusual. It's produced by John Lennon here, with sorry, not with Harry Nilsson, but that's a picture of John and Harry together, and quite a nice idea for the cover. And then you got the words and the musician credits on the back. Again, familiar names: Klaus Voormann, Jesse Ed Davis, Keith Moon, Ringo Starr, Jim Keltner, the usual crew. And what I like about this album is the choice of cover material. I mean, Harry's got a few songs of his own, like Don't Forget Me, which is great, in particular, Old Forgotten Soldier. This is a lovely ballad about an old guy and nobody remembers him now the war's over. But his choice of covers, Many Rivers to Cross, the old Jimmy Cliff number, is just handled sublimely, brilliantly produced, with a nice string arrangement which John would reuse for the number 9 Dream track. A slightly less successful cover with Dylan's Subterranean Homesick Blues. I think it's it's an up-tempo version, but it doesn't really do much for me. But back to gold standard is the cover of Save the Last Dance for Me, which is just absolutely gorgeous. And Nilsson's voice, he was losing it here. He'd had some kind of throat problems, a bit like George the same year, actually. But on this track, and on Many Rivers to Cross, that tortured voice actually suits the material. And just check it out, because it's a wonder to behold that both of those tracks, the tracks which open side A and side B, probably the best two tracks on the album. Then we got Mucho Mungo Mount Elga, which was co-written with Lennon, which is really nice. Loop to Loop, another cover, very successful cover of that old 50s song, I think. Rock Around the Clock, a not very good cover at the end. So a bit mixed, but worth checking out. And then after this, Nilsson's albums was go slightly, gradually downhill. This one, Do It on Monday. Trying to be humorous, and succeeding partially, but not. I mean, there's the opening track, Jesus Christ, You're Tall. Again, familiar names on here. Danny Cooch, Billy Preston. Not Billy Preston, sorry. Klaus is on here. Ringo. Van Dyke Parks. And then this, so not much. The Kojak Colombo was the hit from here, but not that much to recommend it other than that single. And then this one, virtually nothing to recommend. This Sandman album is probably the weakest in his collection, or one of the weakest. Looking at the track listing, I can't think of any song which I would go to from here. It's interesting to have. Nice drawing here with George and Olivia, you can see there. So for a completist like me, it's nice to have, and I'm sure Ringo's in here somewhere, just can't find him. Yeah, there he is. Nice to have, but as an album, as I say, a little weak. But this was a return to form. That's the way it is, from '76. Again, with some strong choice of covers. He's covering That Is All from George Harrison very successfully. Sung beautifully. He's rediscovered his voice by this stage. Throat Problems Gone. Just One Look, a cover song, good choice. 1,000 Miles Away is great as a ballad. I forget who wrote it. Written by Shepard Miller. And then, so good closer to side one, and then a very strong opener to side two, the cover of Randy Newman's Sail Away. Handled brilliantly, one of Nilsson's best ever tracks, although it is a cover version. And that reminds me, that was the one album I couldn't find in my collection, Nilsson Sings Newman, which is an album where he does songs by Randy Newman. It's somewhere, but I can't find it. And then the rest of the album is quite good. Not quite as good as side one, but decent. Got the words again. And this album is probably his best latter day effort. Nilsson, it's just called Nilsson with a KN at the beginning. Dreadful cover, of course, but got the words again. And this one is very nicely produced. Just trying to think. Engineered and co-produced by Robin Jeffrey Cable, arranged by Mike McNaught. And this one has a whole treasure trove of goodies. All I Think About Is You is one of Nilsson's best ever ballads. Who Done It is a great murder mystery song with amusing lyrics about who did the murder, and very, very amusing. And then Going Down is a very effective self-written number with Nilsson on vocal histrionics. Great to hear. And then Sweet Surrender, nice ballad on side two. Blanket for a Sail, lovely string arrangement. Very uplifting album actually, this one, because it's so warm. Laughing Man, again, really uplifting and great strings. Perfect Day is another ballad to end this album. In fact, for this one album from post-Nilsson that you're going to check out, I would recommend this one, along with Pussycats maybe, but this is very good. Then we got a Greatest Hits, which came out, I think, late 70s, 78, yeah. Well, as Greatest Hits go, it's pretty good. And then the last album he put out, really, there was a few things he did after this, like a few tracks for the Yoko tribute album. This was his last album proper, Flash Harry, and it's a weak one, has to be said. And when I tell you that the opening track is the best track, sung by Eric Idle, written by Eric Idle. It's a very amusing ditty called Harry. You can share a joke or two. You can have some, what was it? I can't remember. You can have some Coca-Cola too with Harry. It's amusing, and it's the highlight of the album. Old Dirt Road from Walls and Bridges, the Lennon-Nilsson song is on here. Not done very well here, has to be said. There's a Nilsson-Ringo track co-written, How Long Can Disc Go On? Pun intended, which is pretty dreadful. I don't really think this album has much to recommend it other than the opening track from Eric Idle, and then a nice cover of the Monty Python Bright Side of Life at the end. So a bit of a sad ending to Harry's career, but you know, it's got its moments. It's not a complete disaster. So I think over his career, he's done enough good stuff for us to be happy and for him to be happy with. He's passed on, of course, now. He died in 1994, I think it was. But great friends of Ringo and John in particular. And I think it was one interesting quote when someone said, "You're good mates with all the Beatles, aren't you?" And he says, "No, the only three people that are close to any particular Beatle are the other three Beatles," meaning he played down his relationships with the Beatles, saying, you know, they were very much an inner circle and you couldn't really break into it, which was interesting. Lennon and Nilsson obviously had the famous Lost Weekend together, and spoke fondly. Lennon spoke fondly of him, said God bless him in the 1980 interview, although he was kind of sort of distancing himself from that drinking era, where he was friends with Harry for the most part. But anyway, so that was Harry Nilsson. Hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.